now we have the opportunity for our first panel story sharing of the weekend. There will be 2 more panels, but these are the courageous guinea pigs. And so we have Lyrissa and Caro and Maxx and Gwen. And friends, what were some key aha moments for you in understanding your transgender identity?
So for me, there was 2 really big ones that ended up happening. I met somebody in my life before I even really kind of realized she was going through similar ideas of like, am I trans, am I cis, am I straight, like all those questions that many of us kind of have. And just some of the conversations I had with her was just like, wow, this is me. Like, why have I not really understood this before? So she ended up being a huge part of my life that way. The second big moment was when I had just started coming out to people and kind of humming and hawing about, like, am I going to do this or not? And I remember having this conversation with God, and it was just like clear as day of saying, like, I can't do anything with you if you don't stop living this lie. And after that, it was just like, okay, I gotta do this. I don't have any choice here anymore, because if I don't, well, I'm not sitting here for one thing, for sure. So, yeah.
The first one I think is when I was younger, my dad and I went out shopping for a dress shirt for church, and we ended up in the boys section, and we found this wonderful plaid blue shirt that I absolutely loved. And we brought it up to the cashier, and she goes, "Oh, is it a father-son night out?" And my dad goes, "Well, actually, this is my daughter." And in my head, I was like, "Yo, she thinks I'm a boy." And then, so a couple years later, fast forward to puberty, at the age where girls need to go out and get their first bra. Yay, not. I was actually super excited for some reason. I have no idea why. So I was carrying the sports bras that I had, and I was super excited to have them when an older gentleman walks by me and says, "Why does that little boy have bras?" In my head, I was like, why do I have bras? I don't need these, but I did. So that was obviously like, yeah, why should I as a boy need these? But I think a big aha moment was probably last year when I was here and meeting all of you and having all of you affirm me, and that was when I was really like, yes, I'm going to transition. So that some of you have noticed my voice has dropped a bit from last year. So there we are.
I would add to what Max said, like for me it was many aha moments, one of which was when I started feeling like I'm treated differently and I'm not sure why. I felt like, okay, like everybody's going downstairs to play football on the street, why am I not joining that? And when I'm really like looking forward to it and I'm like in the midst of it and there's some like friction, why am I being pulled out? So those kind of moments where I started like kind of figuring out that I am perceived differently than how I perceive myself. That was the first time, but then I didn't have a language for it. I didn't even understand like where's the conflict coming from. The second biggest aha moment was when I actually found the language for it, and that happened by watching TV, as cliche as it is. It was just one of those episodes, I think, on Ellen or something. And then I was like, oh, there is a name for that. So that's when I started researching and getting to know more that there's possibilities out there. And I wasn't young, just to know, like, I was over 30 then. So that was the second one. And then through all my life, just struggling with being queer and the Bible. And every step through that way, God was like affirming my journey. In a way that nobody else was, so that was another conflict. And when I decided to be at peace with myself and who I am, and actually tell my churches and many churches for sure, and pastors, and just finding peace instantly after that. That was a huge aha moment for me as well.
I think the two biggest, not two biggest, but definitely two that stand out, aha moments for me. One was pre-transition. I was in the bowels of my university trying to find a print shop, like you do when you have a paper due. And a gentleman I had met from a first-year class, he treated me in a way that was maybe not stereotypically the way that a man would treat a man. I was going to go one way, he had told me to go the other, and so he reached around me to guide me around. And the look on his face was horror, because he was doing this thing that was not heteronormative. And I just felt this moment of like, oh, you know what? I can get used to this. I went through a crisis of gender and a crisis of faith. And so I sat out on the dock of that camp at night, and I prayed that God would help me somehow help me, somehow send someone to talk to me about this, somehow help me understand it. And then he didn't show up, and so I said, God, if you don't show up in half an hour, we are taking a hiatus. And he didn't show up. And so I walked away. And then half an hour from me walking away, I was back on that dock talking to someone about my problems. And it was almost like God had said to me, you know, we are going to do this. We can dance together, but it has to be to my time. It's not to your time. I will do this, and like it'll be beautiful, but it has to be with me. And yeah, those are my two of them.
What have you learned about God and or yourself in the transition process?
During the transition process, I've learned that God values community more than I understood. There's definitely knowing things in sort of like that head knowledge way. And then there's also seeing how God works in a community, sort of like seeing his heart. And I didn't understand that before. And I definitely think that now I do. Or at least I understand it more than I did when I started transition.
I feel like all life is a transition process for all of us to start with. Having different transitions, just again, matter of life, we're so different. I have felt God affecting my life and my process since I identified as a Christian, as a born-again Christian at the age of 11. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for this 40-something years, or well, I'm not 50, so 30-something years since then. So that's how I identify transition. I learned a lot about God through my life, and specifically through my queerness and accepting that part of me. First, that what God thinks of me, how God sees me, is not really how people tells me he sees me or knows me. And that was like a shift in my life, because I grew up all my life in churches, different dominations and different ways. But the very common domain was you go to church and you're told how God sees you. You go to church and you're told how God wants you to be, and how God sees your ways and judge your ways. And that's a big word that is used a lot in churches. Although we preach at the same time at churches unconditional love, we preach like line or side-by-side judgment. And that was a big confusion for me. So one of the biggest things is trusting that I am seen by God through his words and not by people's words about him. What else I learned about God? I learned about God that when God says, I love you unconditionally, when God says that by the blood of Jesus I'm saved, it's true, and it's really doesn't come with other buts behind it. It's just absolute, and there's no question about that. And I learned from God to be vocal about it and when I'm kind of questioned about if God accepts me as a real person or not, I just don't need to go into discussion about why the Bible proves it, because His love and His salvation is enough for me. So that's it.
What I've learned about myself is that I'm definitely stronger than I thought I was, and in those moments of weakness where I thought I would fall apart more than I did, I didn't hold myself back together. What I learned about God is that He sends the right people at the right time, and whenever in those moments where I felt like I was not as strong as I thought I was, He's always sent the right person to tell me, or not tell me, but like to talk to me and talk through whatever it was. So He knows more than what I like when I need someone. So He sends them, if that makes sense. Short and sweet. There you go.
I just felt I forgot to talk about myself in this. What I learned about myself was that I'm stronger than what I think most of the times. And I might think that I'm lonely, but I was never really alone, and that's another fact.
I think for me, the biggest things that I ended up learning through this process about myself, just echoing strength. I'm so much stronger than what I ever thought I could be. This process is difficult, especially when you have the world telling you, like, you can't do this. So it takes a lot of strength to be able to fight through that and say, I'm going to do it anyway. The big thing that I learned about God in this, and as many of you in this room know, I've been on a roller coaster ride with that. The big thing that really stands out to me is that for everything that I've lost, I've gained that much more. And I know it's because of His just unendingness, unending everything.
I will also add, like what I've learned about myself is that I'm happier than I thought I could be. Like I thought that like there was no way. Like I thought I was like at the top, but you can go higher. And you can go a lot higher.
What are some examples of how people can express tangible support?
Two things that have been really huge. One is the transition is a process, and it's also a process in relearning how to act and relearning how to dress, relearning how to think about yourself. So mentorship, even in informal situations, is super important, and I can't express just how easy my transition has been because of the people around me who have opened up and mentored me. Second thing, bathrooms and other sort of like gendered spaces. Those are terrifying for any trans person. So if you or your friends or anyone can just watch out for those moments and act as, in some ways, support or act as sort of a guardian in those spaces, that'll go so far to helping anyone who has to deal with that.
To piggyback off of that a little bit, language is so important. Like pronouns and respect for that. When addressing groups, like try and keep it non-gendered. There's going to be guaranteed there's people in that crowd that are not binary people in any way, shape, or form. Just using language and realizing that, especially if some of us say it, of this is erasing trans people, respect that, please. It's very important that because of our language, that's how we show that we're inclusive, as much as our actions do. I think also a big thing is just see us as people. See us as, yes, we have our things, but we're no different than anybody else in the room. And those are very important things, for sure.
Yes. As like there's a big, usually how I see it is there's a big difference between being like really want to support someone and doing whatever you can to support them and rushing to do this, and between asking how someone want to be supported. Because most of the time we want to rush and help people the way we want to be helped, but it doesn't mean per se that they want to be helped the way we want to. So it's a key point for me to actually go and ask. Like, you see someone maybe struggling, and they actually might not even be struggling, but even if you thought they are struggling, go ask them first, check in, how are you doing? If they didn't want to talk, then fine, don't push it, just leave it alone. I can give examples for this, like endless examples, but to sum it up, just respect someone's space, boundaries, and what they want to share. And don't really do anything without consent. I know we talked about this, but like I don't think we need to cease talking about consent in all shape or form. If you know someone who is trans or gender non-binary and you feel or you are in a space with them or someone misgendered them, don't leave it on them to actually correct that person, because it's way easier on you to intervene and say, you know what, they go with they. Or if you don't want to make a scene, start a sentence and refer to them by their pronouns. There's a lot of ways, and especially with the healthcare system, that trans people, and again by non-binary people, find it really triggering and places of discomfort to deal with. If you have a friend, offer to go with them. Offer to even make the call to the clinic before they go and fill them in. Even if you are someone who identifies as a straight ally, if you are someone who identifies as a cis queer person, even if you identify exactly as the same person, it's always easier on me as a trans person to call for a friend who's trans than for me to call on behalf of myself. So just do what you can and put what you're willing to do out there without pushing it. Ask. Make sure that this is the exact, because it's not even about the action only. Sometimes people will be like, yeah, please, I need help with the doctor's appointment. But then they want you to say it in a very certain way. So go in details as much as you can. Asking will never hurt, because if I know it by someone asking me, I would say, you know what? I don't need more questions. But it would be better than me hearing about what they did without checking in with me. You know, that's it.
Wow, I don't really have anything to add because they said it all. But I would echo like what Gwen said about like mentoring. Like there are certain situations that I go into that are like, dude, like so oriented, and like as much as I am a dude, I don't really necessarily know the correct way to like. Yeah, okay, do I like, high five? Do we fist bump? What are we doing? So those kinds of situations, that is definitely very helpful if you like. Maxx are doing this now.
This question may have some overlap, and we're officially out of time. Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna go ahead. How can our generous space community become more attuned to addressing transphobia?
Take everything I say with a grain of salt, because once again, I had a very, very easy transition. And predominantly that was because of the GS community. So I can't necessarily tell you how to do better, but I can tell you what you're doing well, and tell you just keep on plugging on those things. So, inclusivity. There are groups that are specifically gender-oriented in our community. And being invited to those groups definitely makes you feel inclusive. There are people there who have informally mentored me, people who support me, and just those things have been invaluable, mostly for like my own mental well-being. So yeah, just keep on doing what you're doing, guys. You got this.
I would actually just like to.
Yes. Okay. I've been invited to the women's group. It conflicts with work, but I've been invited and it's been fantastic.
So, like I said, I didn't know what to say, but basically, I haven't really experienced any transphobia from any of you, so that's good in a sense. So I would echo what Gwendolyn said, you guys are doing really well in including us in those different gender-oriented groups, even though there's really nothing for men. I have found myself quite often with men, and it's been really nice to be included in that.
I just have to say that, unfortunately, as trans people and as queer people generally, our expectations from spaces are low. And I don't think our expectations should be low. Our expectations should be over the top, and we demand those, and we get what we want. So, when being part of the women's group goes without saying, that's not a thank you. That's how it should be. And same for you, and same for me, and for Lyrissa. In saying that, we still love you. That's not appreciation. Just we need to come from that place. Again, what's transphobia? Because sometimes when we think about transphobia, we jump to the most aggressive, violent thing, which is what are you doing in this bathroom? You're kicked out or being beaten up. But transphobia is, like any other kind of violence, in my opinion, is assumption and working on that assumption. The first most important thing, don't assume anything. I am a trans man. I go with he and him. I am binary. Not all trans people are like that. Don't ever assume that a trans person is how they look like, act like, because that's an assumption. And that's how you can be not to be transphobic. And sometimes we don't think about this as transphobia. We think, oh, mistakes happen, we do mistakes. Well, yes, but that's not a mistake. That's an intention, right? So put your intention out there, not to assume, and check in all the time.
I definitely think Caro hit the nail on the head with all of that. To add to that, I think that many of us come from places of privilege, cis privilege specifically, and that gives assumptions that, well, not so much assumptions per se, it's more the reactions to everything of you come from that cis mind thinking that there's some jokes that get thrown out there that nobody really realizes, oh, that's harmful to trans people, or again, going back to the language stuff, that's important stuff. I think that to understand one's privilege, understand one's place, ask questions. If you don't know, definitely we will probably answer them, and many others will as well. If you don't feel safe asking those questions, there's so many resources online. I would encourage everybody, do that at least. Just understand that our biases play a huge role in how we see each other and how we understand each other and how we interact with each other.